All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. We have a special co-host this evening who should be in bed but is not. Um, and of course, Diana is with us. Hello. Oh. So I'm not really sure how this is going to work because the older co-host can at least understand when I say, just chill out and hang out with us. So we'll see how this works.
We can have an experiment.
So this month we are reading The Undesirables by Chad Thuman.
Yes.
Am I pronouncing it right? Okay.
Yes. I love the cover of this, by the way. It's an absolutely gorgeous cover.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cover, and I've read haven't read that much into it. I definitely read the first chapter, and that part was so creepy, and I can't believe that actually happened.
Let's see, the first chapter, that's the one where she's in... Okay, so it starts off where she's in Leningrad.
Yeah, and they eat people. That's gross.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about this book, and Chad was actually at Boca de Oro, and I quite liked it because it's, true historical fiction. And what are you going to do when you're starving to death and you've run out of rats, you've run out of dogs and cats to eat, you've run out of anything else that's food? You're going to do what you have to do to survive. Basic human instinct just kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I mean, I probably could do it if I had to, but you'd have to I don't even know.
I am borderline vegetarian, and I have been I've gone through periods where I've been vegetarian for multiple years at a time. And initial instinct is hell no.
Yeah.
I will live on grass clippings and weeds and.
But it's frozen. Everything's frozen. There's no weeds. There's no grass.
You melt the snow, make a crappy little soup, and you're covered. That's what I would do.
I don't even know, but that's.
For the longest time, I couldn't even eat anything that had eyes attached to it. When we went to New Orleans, I thought it was safe by ordering the crawfish ravioli because, it's ravioli. Everything's inside the pasta. Not this ravioli. It had the ravioli inside the pasta, and then it had the crawfish decoratively around the plate.
Ugh.
Yeah, exactly. And I just had this awful look like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And it's at this really, really fancy restaurant. And so Ryan, the saint that he is, picked up my plate, cut off the heads, and put them on a butter dish with a paper towel with a napkin over them so that I could actually eat my dinner. So yeah, I do not have the cojones to actually eat people, as this book, states in that first chapter.
Yeah, I remember one of the only times that I had sushi. I had sushi that was so fresh that they used all of the parts of the fish for decoration, and the head of the shrimp was still twitching on the plate.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it.
I'm not eating this. I'm sorry. It looks nice.
Well, the Ryan's caught shark. I've gotten over the eyes thing for the most part. It's not my go-to thing when it comes to fish. I like the heads off. I don't want to feel guilty while I'm eating it. But I've kind of gotten over it a little bit because, I'm married to a fisherman, and he comes home and cleans his fish. So I see that. I see the heads and everything. But it's still moving? No. He caught shark once. And shark, the nerves are still really active afterwards, so it'll still move when it's raw.
No thanks. I'm good.
Yeah, and he was like, check this out. This is the coolest thing ever. Mr.
Not so
Science
much.
over there.
So I guess it's safe to say that we would both die.
We would be food for other people if we were in Leningrad during the siege.
Probably, yeah. So and then I have met Peter. I forget when you were telling me about the book, it's Peter and there's another guy. Haven't met the other guy yet.
Bobby.
But I see the appeal for Peter.
Team Peter all the way.
Yeah.
Peter.
So we shall see. And I think it's really interesting that we're doing balloons here right now, apparently. I think it's really interesting that these characters are all so young.
Mhm.
She's 17,
Yep.
and Peter's 19. So I think this is one of the first books I've read in a long time that have such young characters, but isn't considered young adult, or is it considered?
I think it kind of is considered young adult, but it's more historical fiction based on the subject matter.
It doesn't feel like young adult though. Like how like young adult has a feel. Don't pop a balloon, please.
Yes, let's not bite the balloon on air. But yeah, I don't like me. I don't like historical or YA very much. YA is really hit or miss for me. But what I love about this is that it's so realistic, and given in World War II, it didn't matter your age. You were put in such horrible situations, young and old, that a lot of people of that generation, they had to grow up fast. And you're going to see this with Karen and Bobby and Peter, that they grow up fast, especially Karen. Because, in this first part of this book, she is a little annoying. She's a little bit of a screw-up. She's very much a 17-year-old girl that is faced with this awful situation.
And do we find out what she's doing in Leningrad, like how she ended up there?
We do.
Okay.
We do find that out.
Okay, because that's what I was wondering. It's Wine, Lemon, and Words. Everyone is still awake right now, and it's a very unprecedented episode of Wine, Women, and Words here in the Lavis household. We are about to go to North Carolina for a couple weeks and spend time with Nani, so the kids wanted to see Daddy before we left.
Ah, gotcha.
So, and we do have Chad coming on at the end of the month, and I've already started my questions and have started. Starting with Good Girls Revolt, I realized that if I start highlighting things from the beginning, I'll remember my questions much better when it gets to the end of the book and it's time to start the list. So all of my books are going to be annotated from now on, which is really weird because that kind of goes against everything I believe in.
I highlight a lot of stuff, and I've actually highlighted stuff in this book because I kind of grew up with that with my dad, where if I borrowed a book from him, there were highlights all over the place and notes in the margins. Like I remember Dan Brown's, technically his first book, but it was the second book that I read, Angels and Demons. Dad had annotations and the, because I borrowed it, had the annotations in the margins going, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. Note to self, research this later. And I remember the note to self, research this later, and I called him up immediately because and I was like, you're right, that didn't happen. It is historically inaccurate. And so we had this big discussion about how inaccurate the book was historically. Hi, Lily.
Say hi. No, just
That is a delicious looking piece of cheese.
Don't fall. All right. So this evening, we are going to talk about some awesome new shows that are out based on really good books.
Yes.
The one that I'm currently. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go
we've
ahead.
had this topic before, and I feel like every now and then we have to revisit it because new shows come out, and there's so many that are so good, and you have to talk about them and dish on them, and it's time for an update on said past shows.
Yes.
So, which ones are you currently watching? The new ones that are out that are historical or not historical that are based on books?
The ones that I am, well, let's see. Okay, so I'm watching Z, obviously. I just saw something on Facebook the other day that the second season is supposed to start soon.
For Z already?
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
Maybe not soon, but I at least saw a post about the second season. So if it's not starting, good night, Lily. If it's not starting soon, it's at least in the works. So Z, The Handmaid's Tale, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Oh dear. Landon, can you get out, bud? Come here. You guys are not making this easy for me tonight, are you? Can you take it? Sorry, guys. Go, Lily, go find it.
Did he bump his head or?
Yeah, he got stuck between the chairs.
Ah.
So, what are we watching?
He's got a good set of lungs.
Yeah. The Handmaid's Tale. I just finished the new episode this morning.
Uh-huh.
And then 13 Reasons Why. And I want to watch American Gods. So is that like one episode each week, or is it the full season that's out?
One episode each week.
Okay. And how far into it is it already?
Just one episode in. The next episode comes out on Sunday.
Oh, okay. So, because my mom has Stars, so I can watch that there. And I also want to start watching The White Princess.
Yes. That one's interesting. Now, the shows that I'm watching, I'm kind of watching The White Princess. Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm watching American Gods, The Handmaid's Tale. The White Queen. I was watching that a little bit. And then I've watched Z, which we've talked about, and I've given my criticisms and my love on it. And I think that's it for books to movies that I'm watching. And then today it was announced Masterpiece is doing a Little Women miniseries.
Oh, are they really?
They are, and I'm so excited about that. Oh, and Anne of Green Gables is coming to Netflix.
What's coming to Netflix?
Anne of Green Gables. They're doing a new version of it.
Oh gosh, I hated that show.
It sounds interesting. It does. It sounds, because they're going more into the people, and so it sounds. I when I was a kid, I wasn't quite as interested in it because it was a little too girly for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, kid who I love Voltron and Ghostbusters and Thundercats. Those were my go-to shows to watch. So Anne of Green Gables was a little slow for my taste.
That one and Little House on the Prairie was just like, oh my god, what? Why are we watching a show about this? But I love what they've done with The Handmaid's Tale.
Yes. There's parts where it's like they've made changes to it. And the bookworm in me is like, no, because in the last episode, we're not going to give anything away. But there's stuff that happens even in the first 3 episodes, because it's on the 4th episode now, where it's stuff that happened to other people, like side characters in the book, and they've made it happen to the main characters. And I get why they're doing it, because they want to bring those stories in. And it, how do I put this? It makes it richer, I think, for the characters. Once it's all said and done, I'm like, oh, okay, now I get why they did this, because it makes it richer and it kind of expands out the story.
Yeah, this is one of the few times that I'm actually okay with the changes that they made.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because, all right, I mean, the book was written 20 years ago. So if you haven't read it, or 30 years ago, if you haven't read it by now, the way that I'm not going to say how it ends, but the way that it ends is
so realistic. It's realistic, and it's accurate for, because in the end they did look back at it historically, because Margaret has gotten criticized for criticizing academia, and the way it ends, and the way that the epilogue discusses the Handmaid's Tale in and of itself, it's like it's extremely realistic. It's just so realistic, more realistic than any other fiction book I've ever read.
Yeah. But I love how I love how she expanded on the backstory as far as like what happened in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the book, you don't know anything. You don't know what happened before, and you don't know what happened after. You're reading what's happening to this woman's life in this point of her life. So it doesn't flat.
The blinders. You've got the same blinders that Offred has.
Oh, look at us using the symbolism and everything.
Right?
So, and it works in the book.
The notes on books.
It works in the book, and it works for the story, but for the show, I think they needed to fill it out a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I don't think they could have gotten away with that type of approach to it. So, but I like that she kind of, like, I would like to know more about what happened to the United States and how it got that way. But I'm not sure if they're really going to go into that kind of detail.
They are, because the showrunner was like, we've got this really rich world, and we've got three seasons for sure, and they're going to go through Offred's story, the main story of The Handmaid's Tale, within those first 3 seasons. But he's like, we're definitely going to play around with the world itself. We're going to do other stories within this world, because you've got to. She creates such a rich world. And speaking of her rich world that she creates, I was listening to the audio version that they re-released for Audible, where Claire Danes was the narrator. And by the way, as a book narrator, she was amazing.
Really?
Yeah, she was absolutely amazing as Offred. And at the end, shortly before the show came out, it was when this was done. And Margaret had a little talk at the end after the epilogue and everything, and she talked about her influences on this book. And one of her major influences was James Joyce, who is a very realistic author. And he didn't believe in, when it came to speculative fiction and whatnot, to put in anything that wasn't already there. So Margaret was like, I put everything that's in there, the technology, the world, everything is plausible. Mm-hmm. And one of her other major influences at the time, when she started writing before she started writing this story, she was living in Germany behind the Iron Curtain. So she was living in communism, and she actually went into some of the Eastern European countries that were under communist rule. And when she came back home to America, because she was, even though she's Canadian, she was living in America at the time, everybody was like, oh, thank God that can't happen here. And right? Mind you, this is back in the 80s, before we had a reality show as a president. Mm-hmm. And that really frustrated her, that sentiment of that can't happen here. We can't have fascism here. We can't have communist things here. We can't, they're never going to take away our rights. We're okay. And that frustrated her, because that can happen here. It can happen to any country. And so she took all of these things, the Eastern European communism, the stuff going on in the Middle East with the women in the burqas, and she just all piled it together. So that's what makes this so realistic and so plausible, is because she takes things that are already happening in society, what in bits and pieces, and she just places them in a different country. And we hear it from the perspective of the woman themselves, or one woman specifically herself.
And I think, oh gosh, totally forgot what I was going to say.
Is that a 15-minute monologue?
um, nope, it's gone. Oh man, it was a good one too, and now it's going to bother me.
It's okay. Back up with it.
Well, I think besides whatever I was about to say, Rory as her role in Offglen, Alexis Bledel, I've never seen her like that, and
I absolutely love it.
She's awesome. I wasn't sure if I was gonna like her in that kind of role, but I think she does a perfect Offglen, and I think I like that character more than Offred.
I can't say that, but I love how they're expanding on Offglen's story in the book, or in the show, than more so than it was in the book. And yeah, Alexis got typecast as being so mousy.
Yeah.
In TV and whatnot, and I love seeing her with a little bit more punch.
Yeah, I think they tried to give her a little more of an edge when they put her in Sin City. Do you remember? She was one of the
Sin City movies.
She was one of in Sin City. She was one of the prostitutes, but she was like the good one. So she didn't kill anyone and she didn't really do anything, but she was definitely one of them. So I think that was like the first time that she kind of tried to not be Rory Gilmore. And I don't think it worked. But this one, I don't see Rory at all, which, that's who she is.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I love, if anyone else caught the Margaret Atwood cameo before you read the article on BuzzFeed about 11 things you didn't know about The Handmaid's Tale, I text Diana about that and said, by the way.
I didn't see it. Well, it was interesting. The Margaret talked about that cameo and how much it really shook her up.
Really?
Being there and having it be so realistic. And everybody else, they weren't as shaken up as she was. And that scene really got to her because of the fact that people, not just women, if you have the opportunity to have a little bit of power over somebody else, you're going to take it in order to survive. It's part of your survival instinct. And yeah, that hit her hard, she said.
Well, can you imagine? So you wrote this book 30 years ago, and it's, it's been, critically acclaimed and all of that. It's won awards, right?
Yeah, it's won awards. There's been a movie, there's been a ballet, there's been an opera about it.
So now, but this is the first time that she was in it, right? Like she didn't do a cameo in any of in the movie, right?
When you're looking at these, it's an interesting subject to kind of divert ourselves onto, is that it hasn't been until the last several years that authors are getting a little bit more say in their stories and they're able to make cameos in their books. Because before, the authors were just these unseen people. Now they're starting to be more in the light of things. And, the 1990s movie, which was just as disturbing as one would expect, hair and all. I had to watch it for social study. I had got a sociology degree, so I had to watch it for one of my classes, at least part of it. They didn't show us the whole movie. They just showed us the creepy sex scene.
Of course.
Yeah, that's why I hadn't read it yet. I hadn't watched anything because I was like, I am not touching this book. It is creepy. It is awful. I was just so creeped out to leave the class early. And if you've seen the show and if you've read the book, you will understand what I'm saying. And if you haven't, you've got a homework assignment.
It's a really good book. I mean, you can't. it's creepy and it's terrifying because it's so realistic, and you know, for the fact that she wrote it so long ago, and these issues are still issues today, and really serious issues, and everyone is so divided on it. It's scary. It's not. I don't know. I don't necessarily think I believe I'll be a handmaid in 20 years, but and well, by then I would be an unwoman because I wouldn't be able to have children by then. Um, but I don't necessarily think that will happen, but it's a version of reality that's not so far beyond the realm of possibility that it's impossible to happen.
That's one of the things that makes it a great piece of dystopia, is because it's plausible.
Yeah, like Hunger Games, not so much. We're not going to pit kids against each other in.
No. I mean, look at reality television. Bloody hell! Sometimes we're pretty damn close.
Almost.
Almost. Just look at some. Yeah. Anyways, but to kind of to keep us moving forward with some of our other shows, I want to talk about American Gods, because I
really
thought
want to see
we're gonna
that.
talk Handmaid's Tale all night. I love that book, and I have friends who will read that book once every year or two. They are that devoted to that book.
I bought it. I checked it out from the library maybe a year ago and started reading it, but I never finished it. I had to return it, and I ran out of time. But then I bought it, so I'm gonna have to squeeze it in somewhere because I really want to read it, and I don't want to wait, until my kids are in college for me to have the time that I need to read.
Or maybe at least until they're school age, so that you have like the hours from 7 to 3.
Yeah, exactly. But I love that Kristen Chenoweth is in it.
She hasn't made an appearance yet. I was so annoyed when I was watching it with Ryan last week, because everything in that show means something.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason behind every little thing. You can't really miss much because it comes back later, and that's one of the things about Neil's writing, is that there is nothing that is placed within the story that isn't supposed to be there. Everything drives the plot forward, whether you don't catch it right away or not. And like Ryan would turn away to his phone, I'd be like, stop that, you have to watch this part, let me rewind it. So like, if you haven't watched it yet, there's this scene with the coin that's very important. Do not take your eyes.
Pay attention during the coin. Got it.
Yes. I mean, it's well done visually. The acting is spot on, and I've watched it 3 times now, and I absolutely love the guy who plays Shadow. He, for those of you who watch YA television shows, he was on the 100.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's where I know him from.
yeah, he was on that, and I watched a couple episodes of that until I really could not stomach it anymore. He really was the best actor that was on there. And so he shines in this, absolutely shines. And the story this one is plausible too, in a very not scary way, but creepy way.
So what exactly I mean, I don't really remember the storyline.
Okay, the basic premise is that it operates under the theory that all of the gods are possible, and they survive on our adoration, on our love and faith and worship of them. If we don't worship them, then they wither away and die. So you have these old gods, and then you have these new gods, and the new gods, you have like technology and whatnot. And technology, Mr. World, and media, I think it is, are the top 3 main ones for the new gods. And one of the things that happens, that one of the things that Neil presents in the book, is that when people come to another country, like America, for example, they not only bring their culture with them, but they bring their religion with them. When they bring their religion with them, they bring these gods with them. So these gods are here in America, and it's a total trip, and it's just so well done, and I'm so blown away by it every time I watch it. And I can't wait for Sunday when the next episode comes out.
I've started mastering the art of reading more than one book at once. I used to only be able to read one book at a time because I hated mixing storylines. But so I'm reading 2 right now. I'm reading The Undesirables and I'm reading The Circle.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Or as much of it as you can read since River got to it.
yeah, I ordered a new one. I actually have to check the mail because I think it was supposed to get here today. And that one, I mean, I won't get it. It's an interesting book. It's like it would be a really interesting discussion. But so I think I might have to start reading American Gods too.
Yes.
And then I picked up Tender is the Night at the used bookstore that I went to today. So we're gonna give Scott a little. We're gonna give him a try, and let's see how he is. Even though I'm still not happy with him.
Well, I think that's another one that I think that we should talk about because you're watching Z right now.
Yeah, well, I finished the first season already.
Yeah, that one's.
I'm so bummed out that last week got canceled because I was so excited to talk to Therese and.
Are we going to schedule them? Have they?
Not yet. I haven't heard anything.
Okay.
Just because the show jumbles up the entire timeline. Like it speeds through so much and it skips over so much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the questions that I had for her, because if you didn't read the book, you're just going off of the show, you missed a huge part of Zelda's transformation.
Yeah.
And their marriage and their relationship. And she wasn't pregnant when they went home, right? No, she was pregnant right before they went to Paris.
I think so. Well, there are a couple times in the book where she's actually had abortions, where Scott's pressured her into aborting the child, taking some pills.
Well, after Scotty was born, she got pregnant again, and she didn't keep that baby. And then
she got pregnant before Scotty too, once or twice.
Did she, or was she just late and she thought that, but she would have if.
I think he was. I think there was one because he panicked and he freaked out on her and he was like, "This is not the time. My career is not ready yet."
You're right. I remember that.
And I really wish that they portrayed that, because given this culture and given this climate, Amazon's got the perfect opportunity to be able to do it. I mean, it's Amazon. It's a streaming service. They don't have to adhere to the pressures that other cable television shows have to adhere to. And even still, the cable television shows like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. They portrayed an abortion in there, a character who had an abortion. And I think there's been a couple other ones outside of Shameless, which is on Showtime, where they've portrayed abortion on there too. So you have this opportunity to discuss abortion in a historical light, and they miss it. And this is one of the things that really frustrates me about Amazon, is where it feels so very male-centric, which really came to light after Good Girls Revolt was canceled, because you don't discuss abortion at all. These issues that came up with them. You don't go into her party ways, her lifestyle. It's, even though the show is about Z, it feels like it's a lot about Scott. And where the book was about Z, it was a great biographical historical fiction where you got to see the woman behind the man, and you got to see the truth behind what was portrayed as the truth, because I mean, some of the stuff is alleged, some of the stuff is controversial, but you got to see what the theoretical truth was behind this woman, behind these rumors, this true story of sorts. And they just rush through it and blow it off because it's all about Scott and his career in the show.
Yeah, I don't really know. Excuse me. I don't know why it glosses over so much. I would have liked, and I don't think there was a rush in it. I mean,
No, it's a television show.
and as far as like not portraying things, I mean, regular cable shows these days show so much. And I mean, I remember, when I was a kid and watching TV shows, like you would never hear crap or, or any kind of swear word on.
Game of Thrones. I stopped watching for the just the graphic. One of the things was the graphic sexual content, where it was just like I can deal with graphic sexual content, but it was just a matter of, okay.
Uh-oh. Diana froze. Uh-oh.
You have The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead is extremely graphic, and it's to the point now where it's turned off a lot of people because it's just so graphic. So,
Yeah, I can't watch that show anymore. Like, you don't have to have, it doesn't have to always be brains and guts and like it's unnecessary.
I have nobody to root for. I have no characters to after, I knew the death of Glenn was coming. But the show has a tendency, anybody who shows any hope, anybody outside of this really small circle of characters, if you attach to them, the writers let you get attached to them, they die. It's like this trope within the story. And I can't deal with it anymore.
I haven't watched that show in forever. The last episode that I saw was when Beth died. So I'm like way behind. Beth was the younger sister.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, I skipped that season and then tried again. And yeah, I can't. After last season, I was just like, I'm done.
The part that, or the thing that really gets to me in that show isn't necessarily seeing all the gore, it's the sounds. Like, I can't, like the squishing and the, I just can't listen to it.
So, I mean, yeah, bringing it back to the shows that we're discussing.
You can talk about, going to the doctor and getting whatever pills they took in the 20s to.
Yeah, or you didn't go to the doctor because it was illegal back then. You went to backdoor abortion clinics. You called somebody, some backdoor doctor, and took some pills. So this is something that they could explore, and it almost feels like I don't know who the showrunner is, but I feel like that it's some conservative dude. Because I mean, you don't even have to take the stance of whether it's right or wrong. You can say, "Hey, this happened."
Right. Yeah, that would be the whole thing. I'm, not to make like a political statement about it, like for or against, just the fact that that's what women did back then, and that's what Zelda had. It's a show about her life. It's her story, and this was part of her story.
Yeah, we have to take into consideration that our historical figures are not perfect. They weren't perfect. They just like a good fiction character, they have flaws. And Zelda had her flaws. Scott had his flaws. And, this is one of their flaws. Whether you're, say you're pro-life, this is a flaw of their character that they did this. Take with it what you can, because hey, this is a television show, this is literature, this is you analyzing the story for yourself.
So, and have you watched 13 Reasons Why?
No, I haven't, but I wanted to talk about it because it's been fairly controversial. I haven't watched it because, again, turned off from YA like I am with whips and stuff during sex, I suppose you could say. I think I might need to make some more wine because that one so did not fly.
That show, it's intense, and it's I'm reading all these articles about schools who are like banning it, and I don't know how a school can ban it, but they're
go ahead and ban it. Go ahead and censor it, because you know what? Those kids are going to go home and they're going to watch it.
Yeah, schools are sending letters home to parents encouraging them not to let their kids watch it. and I understand it, because if a teenager or a high schooler is feeling the way that the main character felt, it can definitely like push someone, because it is a very intense story. But I think teenagers should watch it, because you see how, you know, at each individual, I mean, some of the people, like, yeah, there were people who broke laws and people who committed crimes against this girl and others in the story. But some of them, it was just bullying, and you know, people who maybe thought whatever they were doing wasn't necessarily bullying, or it wasn't a big deal. And it shows how, if a teenager doesn't feel like she or he has anyone to turn to, how it can add up and it can lead you to that point. But it's a really intense. I haven't decided if I want to read the book yet or not.
One of the things that's interesting is that these psychologists are coming on the show or on television news stations talking about how the one thing they know about teenage suicide is that it's contagious. Where if a teen thinks it's cool and like somebody gets idolized for it, then they're going to go ahead and do it. And though I can see that, and that's why I was, wondering about your opinion on that on the show, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. But I think it's one of these things where, like you said, watch it with your parents and kids watch it together, so that you have these discussions. Who is it? Selena Gomez is the executive producer, or is it Vanessa Hudgens? I think it's Selena Gomez.
Selena Gomez.
And the reason why she wanted the show to happen was because she wanted a dialogue about this, and we are having a dialogue on it. And I think the dialogue that needs to happen is between parents and kids, but they watch the show together and they talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it is not glorifying suicide in any way. Like, at the entire series leads up to Hannah killing herself.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene, what, and they didn't even show, like, it's not graphic,
Mm-hmm.
but it's intense. Like, it is an uncomfortable scene to watch, and it's really, really difficult. And I was in such a funk for the rest of the day when I watched that episode.
Why I haven't watched is because I kind of get into a little bit of a funk after I watch The Handmaid's Tale. So I'm like, and I'm already, pissed off about a lot of other things in the world right now. So I'm like, I don't need this additional funk. I need some comedy. I need some lightheartedness.
Yeah, no, you for sure have to like watch a Disney movie after you finish that season. But what's really scary as a parent watching this, so you have Hannah and Clay, the main character, is listening to these tapes about why Hannah killed herself. And the scary thing is, all these kids who did something to Hannah, at the end, they're getting subpoenaed to come do a deposition about it, because her parents are trying to figure out if the school was at fault, blah, blah, blah. So all these kids are getting subpoenas, and their parents see it, and their parents are all like, well, you had nothing to do with this. You just tell the truth, and, you weren't involved. You didn't do anything. It's so easy to not know your kid, to not know that they are a huge asshole at school and they are harassing people, and you think that they're perfect. It's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I think the show's good in that way. Speaking of another Netflix show, which I forgot to bring up before, is Radio Girls.
Oh, the Cable Girls?
Yes, Cable Girls. So it's called, I think it was Radio Girls. I think it might be called Cable Girls, but I think it's
the 1920s one, right?
Yes, and for some reason I was thinking of it was based on a book, but it might not be, because there's also Radio Girls, the book, which is based on a thing. So let me go ahead and pull up Cable Girls and see.
I started watching the first episode, but I'm kind of snobby in that It's gonna sound bad. I don't like watching movies that have been dubbed over into English.
I prefer that because I'm too lazy to read subtitles.
I really don't like it, and I don't know if it's because when I lived in Switzerland, I would watch like Friends dubbed over into Italian or German or whatever it was. But I really hate it when the words don't match the mouth. To me, that's distracting.
I try to ignore that because it distracts me too. So I try to ignore that segment, but it's really beneficial for me right now because I'm trying to learn French. So I'm not really focusing on my Spanish because if I start thinking in Spanish and I start talking in Spanish, I feel like I'm gonna lose a lot of the French that I've been learning. So I'm lazy. I really enjoy the fact that it's dubbed over right now. But apparently it's not based on the book, so apparently it does not belong in this episode. But it's still quite good.
I'll have to give it another shot.
It's a fun watch. I should say.
And what's another? Oh, and The White Princess.
Yes.
So
here's my thing. And it might just be because I am sick to death of anything Tudor.
Oh, see, I love anything Tudor.
Yeah, I'm like, it's like, when you've had one certain type of food a lot and you're so sick of it that you're like, oh, I don't want to look at that for a while. I feel that way about the Tudors because I've read every Philippa Gregory book and I watched the Tudors and I watched her movies and now I'm just like, oh God, not another freaking Tudors book.
I haven't started watching White Princess yet, but after the Tudors ended, that's a show that my mom and I watch obsessively, and we've watched that entire series multiple times. But we're like, they need to make a series like this out of every single monarch that England has had because they're all fascinating. But I love
so many other fascinating monarchs out there too. The England gets, the Tudors were fascinating. They really were. I'll give them that. But there's so many others that are fascinating too.
Oh, I want to see a series about all of them.
Yeah, let's do all the monarchies. I sound like my father a lot because when I was really into the Tudors, he was like, the Italians are so much more interesting. And this was before I started writing about Italian history. And I was like, yeah, Dad, let me just read my Tudors book and leave me alone. But yeah, the Italian history is so much more interesting because, okay, so this is my thing with the White Queen. So if you've read the books and you know your history, Elizabeth, with all of her enemies, she considered everybody an enemy. Anybody who was not for her was an enemy. Yeah. If you look at it. Yeah. And she pushed them away. She alienated all of them. And that was a huge mistake. And I was watching it, and
are we talking Elizabeth, the mom who married Edward?
Yes.
Okay.
White Queen, yes. And I had this epiphany when I was watching the show, because I didn't really feel that way when I was reading the book. But now that I know more of the, Italian history, and I've been studying more Italian history, I immediately had to email my dad, and I think I messaged you about it. If Elizabeth had been an Italian or had been different, this story would have come out so differently. Things would have been so different for her. Because, like, okay, let's say she was a Medici, like Catherine from Catherine de Medici in France.
Mm-hmm.
And that old saying that comes from The Godfather, which, God forbid me, I'm quoting from The Godfather, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And the way mafias work is people owe you favors. When the more favors they owe you, the more indebted they are to you, and the more they feel that they have to be loyal and obligated to you. If she had done that with Cromwell, the kingmaker, he wouldn't have felt alienated, and they wouldn't have those fights. And if they did, even if he did turn around and attack her, she would have more people on her side. Because it was like, oh, look at her. She's being so nice to him. She's gone out of her way to make friends with him. And look at him turning on her. What an idiot. Let's all not support him. And I feel like a lot of what she went through could have been avoided.
I think, his brother was nut. But his brother probably wouldn't have been as bad if his wife hadn't been so crazy, and his wife was Cromwell's daughter. So,
But you figure, okay, so a lot of that started because she would not approve of their marriage.
who?
Elizabeth, she talked her husband Edward into not approving of that marriage.
Oh, that's right.
He all set to approve it, and she talked him out of it.
And then,
And a lot of what Cromwell went through was because he was alienated, because he was the king's right hand man, and then she came in and he got pushed aside.
well, I mean, Cromwell was, and how many Cromwells are there? Is there like a rule that there has to be a Cromwell per
Pretty
king?
much, and most of them were assholes, especially if you ask the Irish.
Because there was a Cromwell with Henry VIII too, right?
Mhm.
But wait, no, okay.
And an English family.
And so now we have, what I love is now we have Elizabeth who's going to marry Henry VII,
Seventh.
Henry VIII's dad. So I'm really hoping that what they do next is bringing young Catherine of Aragon in, and when she marries Henry's brother, and then Henry's brother dies, I want that. That's the next series that they need to make.
Yeah, I was after the Tudors. I wanted the story before Elizabeth because that part with Henry's children was so interesting. That time in between was so very interesting to me. So that'll be interesting. One of the ideas I got for a book that I want to eventually do is I want to do. You know how Catherine Philippa does the Tudors sagas with the whole family and everything. I want to do that with the Medicis.
And they had, I was thinking of the Borgias. They did this, the Medicis would be really interesting, and I think that would be a great series also. Mm-hmm. They had a shot with the Borgias, and I feel like they just ruined it. I don't think they did. Like, I think they tried to compete too much with the Tudors, and I don't think
they didn't need to.
The one with Jeremy Irons. There's a better one. Oh, there is? Apparently there is a better Borgias than the one with Jeremy Irons.
Yeah, that one I didn't care for either, but I know which one he's talking about. There was another one, you could see it.
That's on Netflix, right? I think I've seen it, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of it too, and I didn't finish it. But one of the interesting things is that the Medicis are far more interesting than the Borgias. And they're
scandalous.
Lucrezia, she was fascinating. Her life and her story is fascinating, and C.W. Gardner does a book on her that I eventually want to read. I'm taking a break from C.W. Gardner's books right now because I've read like 3 in a row within the past year or so, and that's a lot for me from one author. So the Medicis, I think, would be really fascinating and interesting to do.
I just bought from that used bookstore. I found a historical fiction book about the woman that marries Lucrezia's husband after she dies. Because apparently she died under super mysterious circumstances. So now that's probably going to be the next obsession and research crazy.
The Italian history in and of itself has barely been done, and I've gotten to delve into it a lot with Anita because I had to learn it because at that time Italy wasn't its own country. We have this idea that Italy was its own kingdom, and it was, it's been united for centuries. But really, it wasn't until the 1800s that it was in late 1800s that it became a unified country. Up until then, it was just a bunch of small countries. Like Tuscany was its own little country. Florence was its own country. You had the District of Rome, and Naples and Milan. They were all their own separate entities. And so there's lots of infighting, lots of competition. And with Garibaldi wanting to unify them, I had to learn a lot about it. And it's a really fascinating bit of history that it's kind of been overlooked.
I think there's a lot of history that would make interesting shows.
Absolutely.
even was John Adams, was that based on a book or was that just a historical fiction series?
I think it was based on some nonfiction books.
All right. That one, did you watch that one?
Loved it.
I watched it and I loved it up until he goes to France. And those episodes were like the most boring episodes in the world for me.
I just finished reading a week or two ago, The First Daughter, which is about Thomas Jefferson's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And it's everything through her eyes and through her life. And yeah, that was so fascinating. And so interesting. And I think that would make a great series. Radio Girls was interesting to me. One thing that Ryan and I have talked about, and we've always been curious about, is how did Spain manage to stay out of World War II? They was really tricky, and it was really interesting. And I think we're probably, because it takes place in the 1920s, and World War II starts in the 30s, so we're going to see some of that Spanish Civil War, which we don't really talk about outside of what Hemingway had come up with for his books. Whenever you reference Hemingway, you reference the Civil War because he was over there as a correspondent. And so I think we're going to get an idea of how they managed to stay out of the war.
Since you mentioned that, I think, and not that they would even do anything, it's probably not interesting to anyone else, but being Swiss, I would really love to know what was going on in Switzerland during these huge wars, because Switzerland is a neutral country, so all they do is defend their borders. So
that's one of the things that's why World War II historical fiction books are really fascinating and hot right now, is because, for the longest time we've had America versus Germany and England versus Germany books and stories set within those countries and that narrative. And now more narratives are starting to come out that are outside of that, where you have like Dido's Crown, which takes place just before World War II, and you cover Tunisia. You've got The Undesirables, bringing everything back full circle, which takes place in Russia. And the story of what happens in Leningrad, this, you'll read at the end, this stuff didn't come out until the 1990s. Nobody knew what happened with Leningrad because the Soviet Union kept it secret because they didn't want people to know how weak they were during World War II. But nobody knew about the siege until they released the records in like 93 or 94. So these stories that have started coming out of Russia during World War II.
And even in England, speaking of, information that was sealed, The Imitation Game, what Alan Turing did for Britain to help with the war, and that didn't come out until the 90s too, right? Or the 80s maybe?
Yeah, and you have even in France, you've got the Nightingale. The people who are running for their lives during the invasion. It's so very interesting and fascinating. These things are happening around that main narrative. But that's why I love history. It's so much more interesting than fiction.
Well, you can't make it up.
Exactly. So, people, for next week, read more of The Undesirables, since we'll have Chad on at the end of the month.
Yay!
And I wanted to know what you think about the titles of the books. We've got chapter numbers, but they're also titled by.
Hold on. My copy is right over here.
So for those of you who can see, this chapter here, see if it focuses on it. We've got the cellist. So those are Karen's chapters, and then we have the choir boy, which is Bobby's chapters. Peter's the organ grinder.
I'm not yawning.
I know it's getting late for you. We're almost done. So I find it really interesting, and I think that comes from Chad's screenwriting background, because he was a screenwriter before he started writing, that we have the scene is set with those titles, and I quite enjoy that.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, but that's interesting. That's a neat way to show which character you're reading from. I just love the cover. I think it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. And I'm one of those people who likes the way a book feels, and it's has a nice tone. Yeah, this
It's
is like
pretty.
the Forgotten Garden. I want to pet these books. They feel so soft. They feel so nice. Yes, I am one of those weird people. I don't just sniff my books. I pet my books. I love my books. Okay, folks, have a wonderful week.
You too. And next week, I will be speaking with you from North Carolina.
Yay! Maybe we'll have to do it a little earlier so that since you're going to be in a 3-hour time difference from me.
Maybe. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll figure it out for next week. But everybody, may the 4th be with you. Had to get that in. And have a good night.
Yeah. Happy Star Wars Day.
Bye.
Bye.